Hello, everybody. My name is Kevin Durant, and I'm here today to talk to you guys about enhancing emotional control. All right, so I want to go over emotions, arousal, and anxiety and kind of talk about how these are similar and yet very different. We can classify emotions as they're short lived feelings, and they usually occur in response to events that happen to us. Arousal can be a blend of both physiological and psychological activity in a person, but it also refers to the intensity of certain dimensions of motivation at a particular moment. And this could be to the events like in emotions, or maybe it's the person's mindset. They have what they call the arousal continuum. So what this is it's a continuum where on one side we have somebody that's not aroused at all. This could be somebody that's in a deep sleep or possibly even a coma type situation. And then we have the other end of the spectrum that goes all the way up to completely aroused. This person is kind of in a frenzy, just kind of that person you imagine foaming at the mouth and just going crazy at a football game just because they're so excited and so pumped, where they're almost out of control. Being able to control where you're at on this arousal continuum is a very beneficial thing to be able to help you remain calm, control your emotions, and that's why it'll help you perform better. And then finally, anxiety. So, anxiety is actually just a negative emotional state. And it's usually characterized by some form of nervousness. Somebody's worried. There could be some apprehension of maybe an upcoming event or something you've done. And it's usually has a physical and a mental component that goes along with that. Um, the thought component could be called the cognitive anxiety. And these are things such as worry, maybe fear, guilt, whatever's going to kind of mentally have a negative effect on you when it comes to anxiety. And then you have the somatic anxiety. Now, these could be things such as stomach aches, sweaty palms, your heart's racing, you're just kind of, you're trembling, I guess. These different type of these different states all have a different um, effect on our bodies and our minds and the way that our emotions will uh, kind of have their toll or their effect on us. So there's also a state anxiety versus a trait anxiety. So we can think of the state anxiety as kind of an ever-changing mood, where one second I can be happy, maybe I shot a three-pointer and made it, and then the next second the other team did the same thing and they got back up by 1 point or something like that. Another good example is one basketball player can maybe have some anxiety at the moment of the tip-off right before a game, kind of getting the pregame jitters. And then once they kind of get going and the pace gets set for the game, that they kind of lower back down. And then all of a sudden it gets higher uh, and state anxiety as it gets closer to the end of the game and the game's close. This could also happen in the classroom or on the field with the teacher or coach, and they want you to answer a question because they didn't think you're paying attention. I think we've all had that happen to us before, and it gets our heart racing a little bit. And then we have trait anxiety. And this is kind of just a more generalized part of our personality that kind of sticks with us through the whole of our lives. This is kind of what our behavioral tendencies are that we usually fall back on. That's kind of our natural instinct. A lot of the things that we feel that cause trait anxiety, these so-called threats that we feel, are actually usually nothing super dangerous. It could be something like public speaking or trying to perform in front of somebody. This could cause us to have trait anxiety. But the interesting thing is how these two intertwine with each other. How state and trait actually will go back and forth and kind of play off of each other to have a negative effect or possibly positive effect as well. So a good example to show this could be if I took two field goal kickers off of a football team and I wanted them, and they were in the exact same situation, so they had the exact same abilities, everything was the exact same skills, equal pressure, all that stuff. But one had a low trait anxiety and one had a high trait anxiety. So we can see that put in this situation where they're trying to kick the winning field goal could make the one with high trait anxiety have an even higher state anxiety because he's thinking to himself, oh man, I feel the pressure of the situation. I'm starting to get nervous. And then not only that, now it kicks in the state and what's happening now. It makes it kick in again, kind of overlap those worries. where we can see as the one with low trait anxieties may be used at being put on the spot, might just not be that big of a thing to him. We can see how this would kind of correlate with the low state anxiety, where, yeah, he might feel the pressure of the situation, but he might not crack underneath it. So this is kind of a fun activity to pull off right here. It's called the Competitive State Anxiety Inventory 2. So what this is a test. They have both a trait and a state one that you can pass out. For this one, I'm just using the example of the state one. Um, Now what I want you to do is just look at all these questions, and then on the right you'll see that it has a 1, 2, 3, and 4, and they correlate with not at all the way up to very much so. So as you read these, that says I feel nervous, for example, you're going to judge in a particular situation that you've been put maybe in a sport or another performance type situation. You're going to put yourself back in that situation and kind of ask yourself, was I nervous? Is this not at all the way up to very much so? For you at home, go ahead and pause this for a second, and then we'll give you the how to figure out your results. So, one of the things I like about this is it kind of gives an accurate readout. And usually, if you take the state and the trait tests, they usually will correlate with each other to kind of give the same exact answer. So, the way you would score this short one, so this is actually off of the real CSAI 2, but the real one is the full one is actually 27 questions long. So the way you do this is questions 1, 4, and 7, you want to add up those numbers, and that is your cognitive anxiety sum. That's back to the cognitive, your mental kind of anxiety. Then questions 2, 5, and 8 will correlate with your somatic state anxiety. That kind of goes with how your body reacts. Then finally, questions 3, 6, and 9 will go along with your own self confidence. So if you add these totals up, you'll get a number. So the full test is actually the 27 total questions, and your points would range from 9 to 36, and 9 would be considered a low anxiety, and 36 would be considered high. Now, this is just a fun example. If you want to take the full test on both the trait and the state, kind of see where you're at and see how accurate it is, and maybe where some of your weaknesses lie. All right, so after taking the CSAI 2, this is kind of a fun question to ask yourself. All right, so I have my number or my score and I know where I'm kind of at. So where's it good to be? This is an interesting question. There's two theories that I particularly like that kind of help explain this. And it's not really a straightforward answer, which might make some of you mad, but it's also good to know to help improve yourself. So the first one is the inverted U hypothesis. So what this is, you can see the graph on the right there, how it has performance going up and arousal going on the bottom. And then you see the inverted U, where it gets its name from on the graph. So you can see that the arrow points at the very top and says the optimum arousal level. So what Landers and Arendt did is they found that some athletes would possibly be bored if they had high performance and low arousal. So it would be hard for them to be able to get into the game. Or they could have on the exact opposite where there was high arousal and low performance, where they're just not having any fun at all because they don't feel like they're accomplishing anything. And then they have the happy medium where if you get to a perfect combination of arousal and performance, that people would have the optimum arousal level, and this would in turn be their optimum performance level. So the IZOF on the bottom actually goes a step further, and I really like this one. It's called individualized zones of optimal functioning, and the reason they call it this is Hannon actually says that everybody is different, has their own area where they like. Where before Landers would say that low performance and high arousal would be unfun for somebody, that there might actually be somebody that might get some joy out of that, out of a challenge or something like that, where you can see the three little areas on the graph on the right that are red, the boxes shows the optimal performance levels for three different athletes, where you have a low, moderate, and high, where the moderate would fit more into the inverted U hypothesis, whereas the other two kind of go in the polar opposites. And so I guess to answer the question, so where is it good to be, is it's best to find out where you perform most optimally yourself. Everybody's going to be different, and so that's the hard part is figuring out where it is that you perform the best. So another thing to help know where you should be at is to know where are your sources of maybe your stress and anxiety. Helping to identify the what causes your stresses and anxieties will also help you to control your emotions. They're basically getting narrowed down to what most people believe is situational factors and personal factors for everyone that makes them somewhat anxious in sports and in physical activity. So the first situational source is event importance. So if we think about event importance, we can think about maybe the difference that playing in the NBA Finals would have versus playing at your local rec league um, every Saturday down at your rec center. There'd be different stresses and a little bit more stress you would think playing in the NBA Finals. But another good example would be if they had a team that was a soccer team that has already locked in to play for the championship, but one player knew that the next game they were going to play that wasn't the championship, they were going to have college scouts there. They would feel a particular amount of stress more than maybe somebody else would. Uncertainty also plays a role. So, I mean, the more uncertain that we think an outcome is, or maybe what the thoughts and feelings or how somebody's evaluating us is, the more stress we're going to have. Maybe if a coach is watching you, you're wondering what they're thinking, what they're feeling about what they're when they're looking at you. This also adds to more state anxiety and stress. The more we kind of get these ideas flowing through our head with uncertainty, and also if we just don't know how the game's going to turn out or don't have the confidence to believe that we're going to win. Some personal sources are trait anxiety once again and self-esteem. These kind of tie in together, I feel, where if we have a high trait anxiety and low self-esteem, we can definitely imagine how that's going to definitely add to more of a stress and a state anxiety level. And then finally, we have a big thing that's getting even bigger now is social physique anxiety. So this is basically the fear that we have of other people looking at us and judging us. We kind of get anxious at the thought of people. Sometimes in different sports wearing different outfits, they get nervous about how they're going to look in that outfit. Now, we also can look at this from a different standpoint of if somebody doesn't look like they fit in a certain sport, their perceived abilities actually look worse as well. So the reason why I like this picture on the right is this is a little picture that was taken with a bunch of different athletes in different sports. Some of them have a baseball bat, a shot put, basketball representing their various sports. And I think it's interesting is these are supposedly the ideal body types for their sports, and you can see the difference in all of these different sports. So now that we know kind of some of the sources of our anxieties and stresses, now we can kind of look at what actually happens to us when we have these emotional influences in our performance. So physically, we have muscle tension and fatigue and the coordination difficulties, and these would all compound with each other. If I have some muscle tension because I'm uptight, I'm kind of nervous and stressed. I'm if I'm a lineman on the football team and I'm getting ready to go against the guy across the line, I could be feeling some muscle tension and anxieties the first play of the game, wondering how hard they're going to hit me. This could add to fatigue if we have our muscles always tightened up and at a high tension level, that they're going to obviously get fatigued, which this could then add to coordination difficulties. We can see how these can compound with each other and just kind of make it worse and worse and worse and kind of make a snowball effect. Mentally, we have our attention goes down, our concentration obviously would go down as well with our attention. And then we have visual search changes. And so that's kind of an interesting thing that's happened. And they always use an example that I've heard of, especially with football players, with quarterbacks. If you see the picture on the right, it shows the top that says too narrow, high arousal. And then the medium one is optimal, moderate arousal. And then the one on the bottom is too broad, low arousal. And they explain how if they have too high of an arousal, the quarterback could just be looking at one receiver only and not really scanning the field to see what's the best move for him. Um, and where we go on the opposite end, where he's too low of an arousal, he could be just looking at the entire field, not really paying attention, possibly even looking at the fans, some cheerleaders, different things like that. This is what makes this so interesting to me is that when this happens on either of these two ends, but especially in the high arousal, that it kind of makes us shift back to our what our kind of instinct is or our dominant attention style is. And so we start not paying attention to the appropriate cues. Maybe what we've practiced and practiced the whole week will kind of go out the window and we just try to go on pure instinct which might not always prove to be the most helpful. All right, so finally, the point you guys have all been waiting for: how to improve your control. So, on the picture on the right here, we see the lovely Utah State University Aggies in the blue, and their very own Wild Bill here in Logan, Utah, in his coconut bra and nice skirt, trying to distract this player from shooting and making this foul shot. Now, as we go through these steps to help improve our control, let's kind of use this as a good example, or kind of think about how a player that's shooting the shot could use these tips to help him focus. So, as step one says, we want to identify optimum combinations. So, this is a combination of arousal related emotions needed for our best performance. So, we need to know what to use to help us look past our weak spots that we kind of discussed earlier. That could be some of those different topics we brought up. So, the second one, we want to recognize our personal and situational factors. And we want to understand that these interact with each other and they will influence how our emotions, how lightly or heavily we take the tiniest thing that might happen, or exactly how much anxiety we're willing to let get to us and affect our performance in the good, in the positive or the negative way. And then recognize the signs that we see for increased arousal and anxiety. So this is a very important thing for players to do within themselves, but also for coaches and for parents. We kind of some visual symptoms with a lot of the somatic ones we talked about: the sweaty palms, their hearts racing. If you can, if they just don't seem like they're out of it, if they seem to be practicing and just doing phenomenal in practice, but and then a more competitive setting, they just always seem to kind of have a bad game or practice, or if they're just kind of looking sick or ill. This could all be different signs that they're having too much arousal and anxiety within themselves. And then finally, we need to learn to tailor our coaching on an individual basis. This is going to help us. This can either be by reducing the amount of maybe anxiety provoking things we put on a team, or maintaining it if it seems to be at the optimum level, or we could like simulate it. And this would be helpful for certain situations such as Wild Bill here on the side, possibly getting ready for these foul shots with these bunch of crazy fans behind the board. And then we also want to develop our confidence. You want to we want to help others develop their confidence as well as ourselves. This will help them. This will help all of us to cope better with anxieties, being able to have a positive reinforcement to help combat the negative feelings and emotions that we'll feel. That basically boils down to knowing your weak spots and preparing for them, and always trying to improve. Always find and try different ways that can help you to overcome these different stresses, these situations, maybe the anger provoking times that make us want to blow your top. I'd like to thank you guys all for being a wonderful audience and have a good one.